Okay, continuing from what I was saying about the Catholic boarding school, which my dad went to. Yeah. See, yeah, I'm wearing a cross, but I'm not Catholic, right? We were brought up Catholic because my mum was brought up Catholic as well, but she wasn't like a strict Catholic where we had we were taught the basics, but mum never went. We never went to church, but we went to Wednesday Club, which was like the kids I don't know, like a place. A place where you learn Christianity, but I used to like to go because I got to learn how to do lots of crafts. But anyway, I wear the cross because it's like a protection for me. People see that and they kind of know, like I'm not affiliated with Christianity. I just want to show you this path. Anyway, I believe in Jesus, who is crucified on the cross, and I believe on what Jesus stood for. But I also understand how his cause was corrupted by the church. So anyway, getting back to the boarding school, my dad was put in boarding school, and his I don't really know what the reasons were, but his parents were on a farm out here. I think his dad got sick, and I don't know what his mum was doing, probably just trying to survive. But anyway, people at that time were encouraged to put their children into orphanages and homes. We're in Australia, yeah. Anyway, my mum was in a Catholic orphanage, so she was taken away when she was 5. She had 5 sisters. 3 of them went into the orphanage. The older one stayed at home to work with her mum, and the younger one, who was just a baby, stayed at home with her mum as well. But they were living independently. She was left by her husband, my mum's dad. I don't call him Pop or Granddad or anything because we never knew him. But just want to show you where I am first. Hang on. Isn't this lovely? Anyway, Mum was in the home. Her dad was he was an alcoholic. He went to war, came back an alcoholic, came up all messed up, obviously, like everybody did. And then he went off with another family with 8 boys. Left his 5 daughters on. So she was left. The old lady was left. They just lived in a shed on the outskirts of the farms in Harrathara, just near Geraldton, and they lived off of kangaroos and rabbits, and Mum was brought up from when up until she was 5, before she was put into the home. They used to go rabbiting and rabbit traps, and they just lived off of the land or what they could there. And but the system at the time, so after the war, and there was all these children that were shipped over from Europe to Australia and put in orphanages. Some of them were legitimate orphans, and others weren't. Like they were taken away from their parents because of financial hardship, and it was the same as with my mum, but she was in Australia, right? So they even because they were living off of the land, they were deemed underprivileged, yeah, not being cared for. Same as the stolen generation with the Indigenous Aboriginal people here. So they were taking the children, the Aboriginal children, and saying that they were in poverty because they were living off the land, right? They were all, they cared for themselves, but apparently not up to standard of European standard. They also took the children from Europe that were orphaned after the war, and but some weren't. Like they just took poor, what they deemed as poor, in a monetary sense. Irish, Scottish, English as well. All kinds of children, whatever they can get their hands on, really. And same as in Australia. So they encouraged, and like young women that, like got pregnant out of wedlock, and they were deemed unfit to be able to look after their children, and they were stuck in these orphanages. But see, at that time, they had already anticipated a labour shortage in rural areas, because they'd already, like they've already planned to, like they've already cleared, they've already taken the land, cleared the land, and going to make money out of sheep and wheat, and a lot of these farms too were run by the churches. So these were all kinds of churches. It wasn't just Catholic, because the government paid the government's. So we're talking. So children that were taken from overseas were also taken to, like, there was Australia, it was New Zealand, Canada, and so they were the same places that. Just give me a moment, please. Okay. So these are the same places that I lost my train then because I had to stop for a moment. But anyway, okay, so they went to these countries after the war. This story goes off on a couple of levels, but I'll just stick with what was happening in home, because then I'll talk about the reasons why, other reasons why they were doing what they were doing. Anyway, but the point that I'm getting at the moment is that there was a labour shortage coming up for the agricultural industries. So in all the colonial countries, they took the Indigenous children and the any poor children that they could get their hands on, because they encouraged them, because they would make people feel as if they, in a lot of cases, just make them feel that they couldn't give their children proper education, but they were put in that position, right, because of this labour shortage. So they wanted the children, and then they trained the children. They brought them up in their orphanages, and then put them out to work. So we're talking about a slave labour industry. So then they took the girls and they put them out onto farms to be like domestics, and the boys were labourers. And in these orphanages, the tactics that they used in a lot of cases to keep the children in line and submissive, they used physical abuse and sexual abuse to keep them in control. So so that they would, they can manipulate them into what they want them to be, which was labourers for the industries. So So anyway, my mum was put out onto a farm when she was 12 after being brought up in the children's home. She was taken away pretty much. Nobody really knows who actually put her in the home or put the three of them, the three sisters, into Nazareth House it was in Geraldton. And, Mum, she says that the nuns treated her well and it would have been worse for her. Well, no, she didn't say that now. She didn't say would have been worse for her, but I think, they didn't want the people to be free and self-sufficient. So, and of course it was this excuse to be able to get this free labour with these children and put them onto the farms to work. So anyway, she was put out onto a home and she was, sexually assaulted, and she ran away from there and went back to the nuns, and then they put her to work into the hospital, and from the hospital, so she was 12 when she was put out of a home. She went back home. As soon as she went back home at 12, her mum died. Pretty tragic. So she died as soon as she got out, pretty much. And her father was with this other woman who was apparently not very nice, and she had 8 boys. She went and stayed with them, and then she was sexually assaulted there, not only by, I don't know whether there was anything happened with the boys, but I can imagine that, But there was abuses by her father, so she ran away from there and went back to the nuns again, and then they put her to work in the hospital. And so from then she worked in the hospital for the nuns, and then she was married to my dad at 16. So there's a big age difference there, but Dad was a share farmer with his father, and the nuns pretty much married Mum off as quickly as they could, I think. Encouraged to marry Dad pretty quickly. So she was married, I think she was pregnant first, 16, and then married at 17 with my oldest brother. I'm the youngest of 6, and anyway, they, Mum was put on the farm with Dad and expected to, help run the farm and look after, leaving the home. Mum really didn't have this, she's domestic skills. She certainly knew how to clean, because she's that's what Mum became, was that's all she knew, because that is the standard that the education was. The children in the homes, unless they were extremely, unless they were picked out as, extremely special children, they were only educated to a level of domestication, so that they would be domestic. And it was the same for the, the mission children, the Indigenous children. Anyway, I think that's. I'll leave it there at the moment, and I'll post some more about this story later on. Okay. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my walk, and I'm going to go and have a coffee down the coffee shop. So, thanks.